Anakin Skywalker, in a moment of frustration after being rejected as master by the Jedi Council, embarks on a mission with Mace Windu to the planet Sullust. Windu, concerned about Anakin's growing closeness to Chancellor Palpatine, sees this mission as an opportunity to observe him closely. However, after an attack that destroys their communications, they find themselves isolated in a hostile environment, forcing them to rely only on each other. This situation puts the relationship between master and apprentice to the test, leading them to explore new ways of learning and self-knowledge. Windu decides to teach Anakin the VAAPAD, a combat technique that involves aggressive and rapid movements, channeling the dark force without succumbing to it. The training requires extreme concentration and emotional control, but Anakin, haunted by the fear of losing Padme and by past traumas, finds it difficult to stay focused. The technique, which initially seemed to be a powerful tool, begins to test the limits of his mental strength. Windu, attentive, decides to return to the basics of meditation and concentration, so that Anakin can master his emotions before continuing with the training. After a period of intense meditation, Anakin begins to master the technique of redirecting the dark force, using his opponent's energy to strengthen his own attacks. This breakthrough marks a turning point in his ability with the VAAPAD, and he manages to channel the dark side without losing his balance. With each session, Anakin demonstrates a deeper connection with the Force, surprising Windu with his rapid evolution. However, the training still carries risks, requiring Anakin to maintain absolute control of his emotions. At the apex of his training, Anakin reaches an extraordinary level of connection with the Force, overcoming his traumas and achieving a frightening state of clarity. In deep meditation, he unfolds and projects his presence, appearing to Windu as a kind of Force spirit, something that impresses even the Jedi Masters. When they are rescued by Obi-Wan and Yoda, Windu recognizes that Anakin has finally assumed his role as the Chosen One. Returning to the Republic, Anakin becomes a powerful asset to the Jedi, now with the potential to bring balance to the Force. After returning to Coruscant, Anakin Skywalker felt different, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The weeks at Mace Windu's side had transformed not only his abilities, but also his perception of the Jedi path. When Windu reported all the events to the Jedi Council, explaining the rigor of the training and the control Anakin now possessed over the Dark Force, the other Masters looked at each other, recognizing the depth of the young man's progress. Obi-Wan and Yoda, who had witnessed Anakin's new abilities firsthand, endorsed Windu's words, and the Council finally decided to grant him the title of Jedi Master. On hearing the Council's decision, Anakin felt a mixture of gratitude and humility. He knew that, once upon a time, he would have been elated to be recognized as a master, but now his reaction was different. On his journey with Windu, he realized that, before, he hadn't possessed the maturity and control necessary to assume this position. Anakin now recognized the wisdom of the Council in having rejected him before. He realized that, at that time, he was still dominated by his own fears and impulses, something that would prevent him from becoming the master he had always wanted to be. Understanding himself was a more valuable achievement than the title of master itself. He finally saw his own limitations and, above all, the risks that fear and anger brought to his soul. The shadow of the fear of losing Padme, which had previously been almost unbearable, was beginning to fade. He now understood that his attachment and his desire to control the fate of the people he loved were burdens that kept him from true Jedi peace. This deep understanding did not erase his love, but transformed it, making him more aware of himself and the role he needed to play. The VAAPAD, the combat style taught by Windu, was essential for him to achieve this state of clarity. Anakin came to see the VAAPAD not just as a fighting technique, but as a form of meditation in motion, a channel for releasing and transforming destructive emotions. The intensity of the technique had demanded absolute control of his emotions, and in the process he found the way to unlock his true potential. Without VAAPAD, he knew he would never have achieved the balance that was now part of his essence. This training also made him recognize the depth of Windu's wisdom, a master he had previously viewed with some suspicion. During the combat and meditation sessions, Anakin realized that Windu's rigor and discipline were fundamental to the development of his emotional control. It was as if he had faced a larger version of himself, and Windu's firmness helped him to see what he would never have been able to on his own. Anakin came to respect his master in a way he had never imagined, seeing in him the guide he needed at such a critical moment. Now back on Coruscant, Anakin looked at the Jedi and the Council itself with a new perspective. He understood that the title of Master was not just a recognition of power but, above all, a symbol of balance and self-control. Each Jedi Master he saw gathered in the audience hall carried a responsibility that he hadn't fully understood before. Anakin was willing to follow this path with humility, determined to honor the role of Master with the maturity and respect he now understood. For the Council, recognizing Anakin as Master also meant accepting the inevitable changes facing the Jedi Order. Yoda, always wise and perceptive, knew that Anakin was a key player in the future of the galaxy. He represented the balance between light and dark, something that, although dangerous, was necessary for the equilibrium that all Jedi sought. Watching Anakin in his new position, Yoda reflected on the role of each Jedi in the evolution of the Order, and Anakin was now a source of inspiration for many. Obi-Wan, who had trained Anakin since he was a child, watched with pride and satisfaction as his former apprentice grew. He knew that Anakin had been through trials that few Jedi had faced, and that the control he now showed was the fruit of much sacrifice and self-knowledge. For Obi-Wan, seeing Anakin recognized as Master was the realization of years of dedication, but also a reminder that all Jedi take different paths to reach their full potential. For his part, Anakin felt ready for his new role, but with a humility he had never experienced before. He knew that his power was immense, but now he understood that true control lay not in dominating others, but in dominating himself. The Jedi Council, in recognizing his progress, also gave him a new responsibility. Anakin was prepared to use his knowledge and power in a balanced way, to serve the Republic and the Jedi with loyalty and wisdom. With his new title of Jedi Master, Anakin finally felt at peace with himself. He had reached a level of understanding about the Force and about life that he had never imagined. His journey was far from over, but he knew he was now prepared to face whatever came his way. Despite all the progress made, new challenges came Anakin's way. His dreams about Padme, once sporadic, now became more intense and frequent, revealing disturbing images of suffering and loss. These nightmares brought to the surface the deep fear he carried of losing the person he loved most. Anakin knew he had to deal with these feelings without succumbing to despair, but the feeling of helplessness and the desire to protect Padme were too powerful. He was faced with a dilemma: control these emotions or give in to fear in an attempt to change fate. With his new title of Jedi Master, Palpatine lost the main weapon he used to manipulate Anakin against the Council. The mistrust that once existed was replaced by acceptance, and Anakin no longer felt the weight of rejection. However, Palpatine didn't give up his influence over the young Jedi and, in one of their conversations, mentioned the legend of Darth Plagueis, the Sith who, according to him, possessed the power to save lives. The idea that there was a way to save Padme once again ignited a spark of hope in Anakin, but also planted doubts about how much he really knew about the Force. At the same time, training with Windu in the manipulation of the Dark Force began to have profound effects on Anakin's psyche. During these trainings, Windu intensely provoked the worst feelings of fear and anger in Anakin, forcing him to confront them and use the VAAPAD technique to redirect them. After much difficulty, Anakin finally managed to control these feelings, channeling them in a constructive way, but Windu's lessons revealed the magnitude of the dark power he held in his hands. Anakin realized that this control was fragile and required constant vigilance. The issue of the fear of losing Padme, which had previously seemed under control, returned with renewed force in his mind. Windu's teachings proved useful at this point, and Anakin concentrated on meditation and redirection techniques to curb the urge to give in to despair. He used what he had learned to face his fear without letting it consume him, but the image of Padme's suffering was a constant and painful sight. With each new dream, he was reminded of the fragility of life and the responsibility he felt to protect those he loved. Anakin began to isolate himself more often, trying to return to the VAAPAD techniques and improve the self-control taught to him by Windu. He believed that the more he mastered his emotions and fear, the better prepared he would be to face his destiny, however dark it might be. He spent hours in deep meditation, trying to strengthen his connection with the Force and control the darkness he felt pulsating inside him. This process of isolation was both a means of protection and an endless search for answers. However, Palpatine continued to surround him, skillfully manipulating every feeling of doubt or insecurity. With subtle words, he reinforced the idea that the Jedi Council still underestimated Anakin's true potential and kept him contained. And whenever possible, he would bring up the possibility of saving Padme, implying that the Council would never teach him the power he needed to achieve this feat. Anakin, as much as he tried to ignore it, began to wonder if the Jedi really had the answers to all his questions. These insinuations affected Anakin in a profound way. He trusted Windu and respected the Council, but Palpatine's words stirred something inside him that was hard to ignore. The promise of power and the desire to protect Padme made him question whether there were ways beyond the Jedi to achieve total control over the Force. Each conversation with Palpatine planted a new doubt, causing Anakin to become increasingly torn between his commitment to the Jedi Order and his desire to explore the Force to its fullest extent. The mental and emotional pressure Anakin faced was enormous. He knew that his fear and attachment could be dangerous, but the thought of losing Padme was something he couldn't accept. The VAAPAD technique, which had taught him to redirect these feelings, helped him to stay centered, but it didn't eliminate his desire to know the full power of the Force. Windu had warned him about the dangers of getting involved with the Dark Force, but Anakin was beginning to believe that he could control this energy without being corrupted. To relieve this internal tension, Anakin intensified his moments of meditation, trying to reconnect with the Jedi teachings and the serenity they preached. But as Palpatine's influence grew, he found himself increasingly torn between the teachings of the Council and the promises of power. His mind oscillated between loyalty to the Jedi and the possibility of exploring the knowledge Palpatine offered. This internal conflict only increased his restlessness and, consequently, his vulnerability. Thus, Anakin walked a fine line between light and darkness, trying to balance fear, love, and the desire for power. Palpatine's influence was like a subtle poison, seeping into his thoughts and feeding the doubts that already existed. And although Anakin had achieved the title of Jedi Master and had learned to control the Dark Force, he was beginning to realize that the real challenge was just beginning. Palpatine's constant presence began to bother Anakin deeply, as he realized that each meeting with the Chancellor undid the balancing act he had been building with the VAAPAD. Palpatine's words, always insidious, seemed to undermine the serenity that Anakin had achieved through controlling his emotions and meditating. Anakin tried hard not to be influenced, but the Chancellor kept suggesting that there were other ways to develop his true potential, and each conversation planted another doubt in his mind. This conflict between the Jedi teachings and Palpatine's promises began to generate a tension that Anakin struggled to control. It was then that Palpatine took an even bolder step, suggesting directly to Anakin that he should use the dark side to achieve ultimate power. Upon hearing this, Anakin had a moment of clarity and realized that Palpatine could be the Sith Lord the Jedi were looking for. This possibility shook him, and he saw the figure of the Chancellor in a new light for the first time. Anakin remembered Windu's teachings on emotional control and took a step back, resisting the temptation to expose his thoughts at that moment. Unlike in the original timeline, where his hesitation was motivated by the desire to save Padme, now he stepped back because he was in control of his emotions. With this realization, Anakin made the decision to seek guidance and went to Windu, reporting his suspicions about Palpatine. He revealed to the Jedi Master that he believed the Chancellor could be the Sith Lord, the same enemy they had been trying to find for so long. Windu, upon hearing Anakin's words, realized the gravity of the situation and understood that if Palpatine really was the Sith they were looking for, the Jedi Order and the Republic itself would be in imminent danger. Determined to act, Windu informed Anakin that he would take the Chancellor to the Senate to stand trial. Anakin asked to accompany Windu and take part in the mission. This time, something that didn't happen in the original timeline, the maturity that Windu observed in Anakin, the result of the training and emotional balance he had achieved, made the Jedi Master accept his presence. Windu recognized that Anakin had changed and that he now had the control he needed to face a situation of this magnitude. Together, They set off with 2 other members of the council, determined to stop Palpatine and, if necessary, confront him directly. When they arrived at the Chancellor's office, the tension was enormous. Palpatine, realizing that the Jedi had discovered his true identity, reacted violently, using his dark side skills to attack. In a sequence of quick, deadly blows, he eliminated the 2 Jedi accompanying Windu and Anakin, leaving just the 2 of them against the powerful Sith. The battle was intense, and Windu took the lead in the confrontation, while Anakin positioned himself to intervene, watching every move carefully and ready to act if necessary. At the height of the fight, the classic scene of The Office with the shattered glass unfolded. Windu managed to disarm Palpatine, pressuring him until he was at the mercy of his lightsaber. Palpatine, realizing his imminent defeat, appealed to Anakin, claiming that he possessed the knowledge necessary to save Padme from death. The words penetrated deep into Anakin, rekindling the fear he had spent so long trying to control. Windu, however, did not hesitate to remind him of their training together and the dangers of giving in to emotions. Anakin, feeling the weight of the moment, remembered Windu's teachings on emotional control. He realized that, for a moment, he had let himself be carried away by fear, but he quickly reconnected with what he had learned. Overcome by clarity of purpose, Anakin recognized that he was on the verge of giving in to his emotions, but he managed to move away from the influence of the dark side. Calm returned, and he felt at peace with his decision to follow the Jedi principles, despite Palpatine's tempting promises. As Windu raised his lightsaber to strike the final blow at Palpatine, Anakin felt an inner urge to stop him. For a brief moment, the fear of losing Padme came back to haunt him, and he almost let himself go. However, the memory of the rigor and guidance Windu had given him during his training made him hesitate. He knew that interfering would be an act motivated by fear, something Windu had taught him to avoid. Unable to interrupt the one who had helped him achieve balance, Anakin decided to trust his master. Then, in one decisive move, Windu struck the final blow and ended Palpatine's life. What Anakin and Windu didn't know was that Palpatine already suspected Anakin's betrayal before they even entered his office. The Chancellor had noticed subtle changes in Anakin's behavior and noticed that his manipulation was weakening. This made him act quickly, planning retaliation before it was too late. When the Jedi arrived in the room, Palpatine had already made a drastic decision. He had just executed Order 66, starting a hunt against all the Jedi scattered throughout the galaxy. The extent of Palpatine's plan was only revealed when Anakin and Windu returned to the Jedi Temple, shortly after the Sith's execution. When they arrived, they saw an atmosphere of chaos and despair. Jedi were running around, trying to gather information about what was happening. The news was spreading fast. The Jedi were being exterminated en masse by the Republic's clone troops, now under Palpatine's control. Anakin and Windu felt the weight of betrayal and the magnitude of the danger they faced. While they were trying to process the information, a troop of clones entered the temple, armed and ready to eliminate any Jedi they came across. Anakin and Windu immediately realized that there was no chance of victory in a direct confrontation against the overwhelming number of soldiers. The only option was to try and save as many of the younglings and Jedi present as possible. They quickly organized an escape, leading the youngest to a safe exit route, but the situation was becoming increasingly desperate. During the escape, Mace Windu witnessed something that left him impressed and, at the same time, uneasy. He saw Anakin in action, fighting fiercely to protect the younger Jedi and ensure a safe escape route. Since their training together, Windu had yet to see Anakin's true potential in combat. The intensity, precision, and speed with which Anakin moved were astonishing. Every blow, every decision, was executed with coolness and calculation, a stance that showed how much Anakin had matured and mastered his emotions. Despite the chaos around him, Anakin kept control of his emotions, concentrating on protecting those under his charge. He applied Windu's teachings, suppressing any impulse to despair when he remembered Padme and focusing on the immediate mission. With each advance of the clones, Anakin channeled his power to repel the attacks, and with Force lightning, he struck down the soldiers with surgical precision. It was as if he had unlocked a new layer of power, becoming an unbeatable warrior in the midst of darkness. Windu, watching closely, saw in Anakin the reflection of what a Jedi should really be. The coolness and determination that Anakin showed, combined with the serenity he acquired during his training, made him a practically perfect Jedi. Windu realized that the balance between light and dark was palpable in Anakin, who now seemed not to fear his own feelings, but to master them and redirect them towards the greater good. This attitude reflected the mastery he had gained over himself, a control that made him unique among the Jedi. As they continued their escape, Anakin, without hesitation, made way for the younglings and other Jedi, taking on the clones with mastery. His combat skills were at a level beyond what any other Jedi present could achieve. Every move was calculated, every blow executed with precision, and the soldiers fell in droves before him. Windu now understood that Anakin had achieved the state that all Jedi strive for, the perfect fusion of emotional control and raw power. He didn't just fight, he transcended combat. That moment was a confirmation of the potential Anakin had carried since the beginning. It was as if the path full of difficulties, fears and doubts that he had traveled was essential to awakening the chosen one that was now manifesting. His imperfections and fears, which had once been obstacles, had become tools for his growth. By controlling these emotions and turning them into strengths, Anakin emerged as an imposing figure, someone who was finally prepared for the role he had prophesied. As they fled the temple, Windu realized that Anakin not only mastered the Force to its fullest extent, but also inspired other Jedi to follow his example. He led with courage, and every step he took was accompanied by an aura of unwavering determination. Anakin now embodied the ideal Jedi, the warrior who sought peace even in the midst of chaos, without allowing himself to be dominated by the dark forces around him. And, despite the losses, the escape from the temple showed that, with Anakin at their side, the Jedi Order still had real hope of rising again. After their dramatic escape from the Jedi Temple, Anakin and Windu managed to hide in a safe place in the underground areas of Coruscant. Chaos still dominated the city, and both knew that any movement could reveal their location to the clones, who were intensely patrolling the area. With no immediate options, they decided to wait, trying to keep calm and protect the younglings and the few Jedi they had managed to save. Windu and Anakin took turns keeping watch, on the lookout for any sign of danger, while physical and mental exhaustion took over. A few hours later, Windu finally managed to establish communication with Yoda and Obi-Wan. He reported his position and the situation of the survivors, awaiting instructions from the Jedi Masters. Yoda and Obi-Wan quickly organized a rescue and, after a few moments of waiting, a small ship landed discreetly near the hideout. Anakin, Windu, and the others boarded, leaving behind what was left of the Jedi Temple, which was now overrun by clones. The sense of loss was overwhelming, but they knew there was still much to be done. Inside the ship, Yoda and Obi-Wan updated Anakin and Windu on the devastating situation. Virtually all the Jedi had been killed, and the few survivors were scattered and in hiding. Apart from the younglings they had rescued, there were only a handful of Jedi scattered throughout the galaxy. It was a grim reality for the Jedi Order, which, in a matter of hours, had been reduced to fragments. Those few who were present on the ship were now effectively the Order's last hope. Despite the losses, Obi-Wan brought news that gave a slight sense of relief. With Palpatine's death, the Empire's beginnings had been interrupted before they were consolidated. Without a central leadership to control the clones, the Senate quickly regained control of operations, ordering the deactivation of the control chips that had caused the execution of Order 66. This action brought an immediate halt to the attacks on the remaining Jedi, allowing them at least a moment's respite. However, the damage had already been done and the Jedi Order had been practically decimated. For Anakin, the feeling of emptiness was intense. He knew that Palpatine's death had been a victory, but the cost had been devastating. The Jedi Order, which represented peace and justice in the galaxy, was now almost extinct. The few survivors, carried an enormous burden, a responsibility to keep alive the essence of what it meant to be Jedi. The weight of this new reality took hold of him, and Anakin understood that the road ahead would require courage and determination. Each of them would play a crucial role in rebuilding what had been lost. While processing this information, Anakin received unexpected news. He had been called urgently to Naboo because Padme had gone into labor. Anakin's heart soared when he learned that he was about to become a father, and hope began to shine again amidst the darkness that surrounded him. With the help of his fellow Jedi, he immediately boarded a ship to Naboo, determined to be by Padme's side at this important moment. For him, this was a chance for a fresh start, something worth fighting for. On arriving on Naboo, Anakin was taken directly to where Padme was. When she saw him, Padme calmed down, her face lit up by Anakin's presence. He held her hand, giving her the security and love she needed at that moment. Padme, although exhausted, was relieved to know that Anakin was safe. This reunion, in the midst of all the chaos they had experienced, brought them both a sense of peace, a small island of tranquility in the midst of the storm that was ravaging the galaxy. Shortly afterwards, Anakin and Padme witnessed the birth of their children. The baby's first cries broke the silence of the room, and Anakin felt a wave of intense emotions at seeing his children for the first time. It was as if, in that instant, everything he had lost and all the suffering he had gone through took on a new meaning. The faces of the newborns seemed to bring with them a promise of hope and renewal, something that, for him, was essential for moving forward. Anakin held each of the babies in his arms, feeling a mixture of love and responsibility that he had never experienced before. Those little beings were now the center of his life, and he knew he would do anything to protect them. The presence of his children brought him a new purpose, a reason to face whatever challenges the future held. Together, he and Padme now shared an even stronger bond, something that transcended the darkness spreading across the galaxy. As he watched his children, Anakin realized that the Jedi legacy had to be maintained if they were to grow up in a peaceful world. He knew it would be a difficult path, but he was determined to rebuild what had been destroyed. With his family by his side, Anakin felt renewed and, for the first time since the attacks, a spark of hope lit up his heart. After spending time on Naboo with Padme and their newborn children, Anakin felt it was time to return to the capital, Coruscant, to join the Jedi Council and take on his responsibility in rebuilding the Order. With the Council reduced to just 4 members, each voice became even more essential in the decisions that would shape the future of the Jedi. Anakin knew that his unique experience and connection to the Force brought an important perspective, something he felt it was his mission to share. In the first discussions about rebuilding the Order, Anakin brought up an idea that surprised his colleagues. He suggested that the Jedi Order should adopt a new approach, a vision that allowed for a broader and less rigid understanding of the Force. During his time of meditation on Naboo, Anakin reflected on everything that had happened, from the traumas and fears that had overwhelmed him to the fall of Palpatine. He concluded that everything seemed to be part of a greater balance that the Force was trying to restore. It was as if the Force was leading the Chosen One to renew and evolve the Jedi Order. In explaining his point of view, Anakin mentioned that the VAAPAD, the technique Windu had taught him, had been crucial to his development. He described how this practice had enabled him to face and master the dark side within himself, awakening his true potential and strengthening his emotional control, which had previously been his main weakness. Anakin argued that knowing and dealing with the dark side without giving in to it was a fundamental step for any Jedi seeking balance. This practical and experiential approach, he said, could prevent future falls and bring a new depth to Jedi training. Anakin also pointed out that, without the practice of the VAAPAD and the emotional control he had gained, he would have allowed himself to be influenced by fear and prevented Windu from eliminating Palpatine. This detail made it clear to the Council that, although the VAAPAD involved risks, it also brought transformative power. Anakin's ability to master his emotions was what saved them from a dark fate and allowed peace to be restored to the galaxy. This concrete example reinforced the importance of his proposal for a Jedi Order that embraced learning and controlling emotions. Anakin's arguments had solid foundations and a deep basis in his own experience. He demonstrated an understanding of the Force that few Jedi possessed, something that set him apart and made him stand out as a leading figure in the new era of the Jedi. He was a Jedi who understood the importance of reconciling strength and compassion, light and darkness, and was willing to share this vision with the Order. His colleagues on the council realized that, in expressing himself, Anakin was not seeking power or control, but a genuine and balanced reconstruction. The council watched Anakin's transformation closely, not only as the most powerful Jedi of all time, but as someone who brought a rare wisdom. He possessed the vision needed to reorganize the Jedi Order so that it would become stronger and more resilient, without the old dogmas that had caused so many downfalls in the past. The members of the council felt that, at last, the Chosen One's prophecy was being clearly and inevitably fulfilled. Anakin, with his proposal for balance, was bringing renewal to the Order. As Anakin set out his ideas, he mentioned the importance of the Jedi not repressing their emotions, but learning to channel them wisely. This was a radically different approach to the Jedi tradition, which always prioritized detachment as a way of avoiding the dark side. Anakin, however, was proof that emotional control could be achieved without the need to repress or deny feelings. For him, true mastery of the Force included acceptance of one's emotions and the ability to redirect them for the good. The Jedi Council reflected on Anakin's words and the importance of adapting the Jedi teachings to the new context of the galaxy. Anakin's words, which would once have been seen as impulsive, now brought a clarity that everyone respected. Yoda, in particular, saw in that young Jedi a maturity he had never witnessed. He knew that Anakin was speaking with the experience and understanding of someone who had faced his own demons and emerged stronger and more balanced. Anakin then proposed that for the Jedi to truly achieve harmony with the Force, training should include practices of deep self-knowledge. These practices, inspired by his experiences with the VAAPAD and the meditations guided by Windu, would give the Jedi the tools to face and transform their own fears and dark emotions, instead of repressing them. He believed that this was the only way to form a new Jedi Order, stronger and more resistant to the temptations of the dark side. Anakin knew that this would require courage and commitment, but he also believed that, with this approach, they could avoid the tragic falls of the past. The Jedi Council, reflecting on Anakin's words, realized that a new era had indeed begun. Yoda, with a look of approval and respect, recognized Anakin's role as the true Chosen One, the one who would bring about the long-awaited balance. Under his guidance, the Jedi Order was reborn, now with a renewed philosophy based not only on light, but on the balanced integration of the entire Force. Anakin Skywalker had fulfilled his destiny, not only as the most powerful Jedi, but also as the leader who would shape a more peaceful and just galaxy.